Hey, Marlins fans, welcome to a new edition of Big Fish Small Pod for Wednesday, May 15th, here on the Fish on First podcast channel, presented by MPT College Consulting. I'm Ely Sussman. As this game was going on Tuesday night with Ryan Weathers dealing, I knew about halfway through that I would have to do a pod reacting to it. It was easily the best starting pitching performance by a Marlins pitcher so far in 2024. And even though it was unique in several regards, it also was extremely familiar to me. I'll explain why. The final line for Weathers: 8 scoreless innings against the Detroit Tigers, 3 hits, no runs, no walks, 4 strikeouts, 97 pitches, 65 of them for strikes. No Marlins starter had recorded or even gone out to pitch this 7th inning at all during this season until Weathers just did it right here. And we're more than a quarter of the way through this season. This was such an outlier in terms of the both effectiveness and the efficiency, the ability to go deep into a game the way that he did, and not exactly out of nowhere for Weathers. Very quietly, he has had, I would say this is his 3rd straight great start, even though the final lines the previous couple times didn't necessarily reflect that. This was like the natural step in his progression moving forward. It was also very unusual. It was not by any means a dominant outing. I would not say it was a phenomenal outing. You can use a lot of high praise for it. Let's not confuse it with a dominance, that kind of pitcher controlled, overpowering performance. As I noted, just 4 strikeouts, a ton of ground balls for Ryan Weathers in this game. A ground ball rate of 68.2% for somebody that entered this game at about 45% ground balls this season. And he's somebody that, including this start, he leads the Marlins pitching staff in strikeouts this year. We've seen games where he has been overpowering with his swing and miss stuff, including a double-digit strikeout game just a few weeks ago. And yet in this one, only 5 swinging strikes out of 52 swings. That is alarmingly low. Without even diving into it, I can assure you that is the lowest whiff rate that he's had in any outing this year, and yet his most successful one against the Tigers. What stood out to me is that the Tigers loaded up their lineup with about as many right-handed hitters as possible. The only lefty in there was their star outfielder, Riley Green, who DH'd in this one. Everybody else was either a right-handed batter exclusively or a switch hitter. With Weathers, it may have gone under the radar, actually, how large his platoon splits had been entering this outing. About a 400 gap in OPS between righties and lefties. He's been able to miss a lot more bats against lefties this year, unsurprisingly. And this was, I'd say, I think the only time this year where he's had to deal with this many opposite-handed hitters. And yet over and over and over again, he got them to roll over, hit ground balls to the left side. In particular, Tristan Gray, extremely busy at third base, making a ton of throws across the diamond. 8 assists for Tristan Gray on this night. He was kept extremely busy with Weathers pitching. Fastball velocity right where we come to expect it, in the mid-90s, topping out at 98, averaging with his four-seamer 96.4. Plenty of sweepers he mixed in and plenty of changeups. Those are his 2 main put-away pitches so far this year. And yet, in this particular game, they didn't really put away that many batters. But ultimately, what matters is throwing up zeros, getting through innings efficiently. He's somebody that probably could have gone out for the 9th inning under different circumstances. Of course, on the other side of this game, Reese Olson of the Tigers was equally effective. Almost an identical final line for Olson in this one, except with a couple more strikeouts than even Weathers had. And so because of that, the Marlins understandably go to Tanner Scott in the 9th inning, with the game still scoreless entering the 9th inning. And they end up pulling it out and winning in extra innings. As I teased a couple of minutes ago, the reason why this felt so familiar, despite being so unmatched by any other Marlins pitcher this season, is that it had a lot of traits of a Sandy Alcantara start. Sandy, of course, the most recent Marlins pitcher to give 8 innings in a single start. Even last year, when he didn't perform up to his usual standards in terms of run prevention, he would still go deep into games, having several of those outings where he ate up those innings, even a couple where they were scoreless as well. And he did it on those days, for the most part, those would be the days when he also had lower than usual strikeout numbers for him, when he wasn't necessarily going for swings and misses. He was prioritizing soft contact, ground ball contact. Sandy has made it a tradition throughout his career to get a lot of ground balls. And with Weathers, this is relatively new. He has not had any particularly high ground ball tendencies during his career or even this season coming into this outing. And he made that interesting strategic approach in this one in order to get those grounders and to get quick outs. This is a Marlins infield defense that has not performed well this year. There have been other games where ground ball heavy performances have backfired for those pitchers, and they've not been rewarded for getting what should be really makeable outs. But in this one, Weathers did a good job at exactly that. I think it was that broke up the perfect game in the sixth inning. It was a grounder that was just out of the reach of Josh Bell at first base. So maybe if there is a more agile first baseman there, that Weathers' perfect game bid goes a little longer than it actually did. But the combination of being really efficient, getting that soft contact. Overall, I think there were only two hard hit balls that were not on the ground against Weathers, meaning balls 95 miles per hour or more exit velocity. All the other ones were on the ground, and that made them easily makeable plays. He used his changeup. It is that kind of pitch that, especially against righties, he usually leans on it to get those strikeouts. Instead, he used it a lot early in the count in this one to get some of those off-balance swings when guys weren't expecting it. It was not by design to get as few swinging strikes as Weathers did, but he made it work for him, all things considered, with the way that he was mixing up his pitches, that way that he was attacking the zone. And to be honest, his command was not especially precise either. Yet another Sandy Alcantara comparison where there are times where simply having control can be just as important as your command. That throwing strikes and getting ahead in the count could be just as important as actually dotting the corners. So in this one, Weathers, for the most part, not necessarily hitting his spots precisely, but he was around the zone. He was getting himself into advantageous counts, leading to a lot of those desirable outcomes on balls in play for him. He's not going to be Sandy the rest of the season, not every time out. But as I mentioned, the last couple starts entering this one were also encouraging, in my opinion. Overall, now the last 3 starts combined for Ryan Weathers, he has issued 1 walk in 20 innings during that span. And his walk rate this season, if you include tonight's performance, significantly better than his career norms. And when he's also avoiding getting the ball barreled, it's encouraging. Yet another way that ties in a little bit to what Sandy does is the differential now between his ERA and his FIP. Entering this game, there was a half-run difference between them, and including this one, it's now about 3/4 of a run. A 3.81 ERA for Weathers through his first 9 starts, a FIP of 4.57. Having watched him pitch a lot this season, I am more of a believer in that run prevention number than I am the underlying stuff. He has made really encouraging strides with his pitchability this year. Now having 4 pitches that he trusts quite a bit in his 4-seamer, his sinker, his changeup, and his sweeper. All of them got pretty significant use in this outing against the Tigers. So that has been a really encouraging development. I remind people for a relatively overlooked trade at last year's deadline that didn't make much of a difference at all for the Marlins in qualifying for the 2023 postseason. But he has impressed ever since spring training, made that opening day rotation. He is stuck in that rotation. And I think it goes without saying that has that spot locked down in this rotation for the foreseeable future and comfortably at that. One of the top 3 guys in this rotation for the near term, along with Jesus Luzardo and Braxton Garrett. So congratulations to Ryan Weathers, even though he has to settle for a no decision here due to the inept Marlins offense. The team itself pulls out a win, improving, if you want to say so, to 12-32 on the season. And I'll continue to be really infatuated with where Weathers goes from here because he continues to get a little bit better. I don't think it's premature to think that on a team that, just like every other, needs one all-star at some point to represent them at the Midsummer Classic, it's not outside the realm of possibility that Weathers could make the case with the fact that he's been available and that he continues to trend in a positive direction as this season goes on. I've been Ely Sussman for the Small Pod here on the Fish on First podcast channel, presented by MPT College Consulting. Check them out at mptcollegeconsulting.com to learn more about their services and schedule a free consultation. Go Fish.